My strategy currently is don't screw up so bad that they don't invite me back. Um,
Oh,
my strategy at the moment is I'm sorry. Try to be the best customer service rep I can possibly be. Um, and learn how to use a spreadsheet. So that's pretty much.
It's good
I
that
thought I
you're
knew how, but
it's good that you're setting high expectations for yourself.
yeah, that's it for now.
All right, let me catch this call right quick. I'll be right back.
right.
Progress. Progress.
Let me get my book out here so I can take notes. I always like to make sure I quote people accurately. It's kind of like one time somebody said, "Did you say the superintendent was a pinhead?" I said, "Nope." I said he could wear a hat for a thimble for a hat. Quote me accurately.
Savannah, did we volunteer to go first, or did we want to do that?
No, I'm picking who gets to go first.
Well, pick us then.
No.
Now he's not gonna would. Thanks. I'm just kidding.
No. The way this will work, and welcome, good evening, everybody. The way this will work is whatever order we go in tonight, we reverse next time. So that by the end, everybody gets a chance to go first. But Marshall's group goes first tonight because they're the first one that turned their assignment in. And so that's always the way I pick the first one. Whoever turns their assignment in first gets to go first. That's your reward for being on time.
Well, thank you very much.
Is to do that. You always, I'm very much a product of the bluebirds, buzzards, and robins. Back in the old days when we used to breed, the bluebirds were the top group, then the robins, and then the buzzards. And so the achievers. I make sure that they get to go first. And so let me share my screen. Welcome, everybody. It's time to get started here, I believe. Close enough for government work. I want to look at our weekly schedule. I've got it pulled up. And so please remember that try to get your OMA task 1 to me by Sunday night at 9. If you can't, get it to me shortly after that. The ones that have been coming in have been great. Savannah and I talked today about task 2. So some of you are already moving on to that. That's good. Please remember on your OMA task 1, and I know I've said this a couple times, but you probably didn't hear it, or I might not have said it loud enough or often enough. When they talk about equity and transparency, that is how much involvement your school improvement team has in your budget and master schedule. What is the purpose of a school improvement team that's made up of teachers and community members and parents, and even in secondary school, a student, is equity and transparency. That's the whole point of having a school improvement team. And so that's why you're asked specifically in OMA Task 1, what is the role of the school improvement team in the budget and by extension, the master schedule? That's where equity and transparency comes from. It's not some nebulous thing that do they get to be involved in that? Because that's their purpose, is equity to represent all stakeholders and transparencies, so everybody knows what our priority is and how we made those decisions. And if your principal does not allow the school improvement team any input in the budget, nor the school or the master schedule, then there is no equity or transparency. Can't be guaranteed. It may occur, but it can't be guaranteed. So don't forget that part of your OMA Task 1. All right, so we're going to get started tonight. Make sure I'm recording, everything's good. So pause your first slide with all your names on it so I can make sure I write it down. So whoever in Marcia's group's going first, hit it. Okay, hold 1 second now. All right, here you go.
All right, so I'm going to do the first 2 slides. General thoughts and reactions of the group after reading the case study and going back and referencing our Chapter 6 and Chapter 8 of our Guide to School Law. Thoughts and consensus reactions amongst the groups. Yes, we all agreed that he did cheat and he is wrong. Teacher did abide by the school handbook.
Stop.
We also,
Stop.
everybody hear me?
Yeah, stop.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Explain to me how the teacher abided by the school handbook.
I have to go back and look at the thing, but school handbook stated what the grading policies were.
No, the teacher didn't follow the grading policy. Couldn't have.
All right. Well, maybe that was a typo in ours.
The
'Cause I think
teacher, that should read, the teacher did not abide by the school handbook.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah, that's what it should say then.
Yeah, that's what it should say. It should not, the teacher did not abide by the school handbook. Nowhere in any school handbook in North or South Carolina, we'll just say North Carolina tonight, does it say that a homework assignment can count more than 50% of the grade. That is against state law. The General Assembly and the North Carolina Department and their administrative unit, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, sets the allowable limits in a grading policy, and then the local Board of Education in Gaston County adopts that policy based on the parameters set up by NCDPI from direction from the General Assembly. Now, let's be clear. Does anybody know how much can a state exam like an EOG or an EOC count? What is the maximum that it can count on a student's final grade?
30.
30.
30 to
What is the adopted level in Gaston County?
Is a 20.
20. All right. State parameters on homework. Now you say, well, this was an assignment. If it happens outside of school, What does DPI call that? Somebody, anybody. If it
So that
happens
makes-
outside of the normal class structure or the school day, what is that referred to as?
Homework.
Homework.
Yeah.
What are the permissible limits on homework according to the General Assembly as interpreted by DPI, as adopted by the Gaston County Board of Education? What are the parameters on homework?
10%.
10% maximum, and as little as 0%. As little as 0, the most is 10%, maximum. Max is 10% on homework. And that's
Dr.
in
Lane?
aggregate for the entire year.
I had a question on that. Gaston County is, I think they phrase it as classwork and homework, and they had that listed as 40%. I did
Yeah.
have a question. Is that how they're able to get by that? Okay.
So classwork can count up to 30%. That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay. That's what it is. Okay. Thanks.
That's where I was headed next. The state has it broken down. And then what is the other one? So you've got state test, classwork, homework, and what is the fourth one?
Quiz test.
Local
Quiz.
assessments.
Local assessments, right?
Local assessments, like quarterly tests, they can count for how much? That would be 20. So when you add all these together, how much do you get? You get 100%. There you go. So the teacher, according to, now, where's all this written down? It's in your faculty handbook. What is the principal's responsibility on the first required workday every year? What's the principal required to do with you? Go over the
Over
faculty
the handbook.
handbook,
That sucker. Yep.
including the grading policy. So that a teacher gave a homework assignment and made that count more than 50% of the whole grade for the year, the yearly grade, means that they did not abide by the school handbook and have broken state law to start with. So this is the first violation of law tonight, is the violation of state law and local policy, board policy on the grading policy for the district. So that's the first one. All right, continue on until I holler stop again.
All right, let me wait for it to pull back up. Okay. Another thought or reaction that we had were that obviously with the superintendent cautioning the principal and handling the situation, that politics has a hand in decision-making.
Stop. That is not accurate either. This is a law case. Why did the superintendent simply tell the principal, you need to factor in and be careful here? Does that mean that the superintendent is playing politics? Did he ask for a particular outcome here?
No,
The superintendent asked for a particular outcome.
no.
He did not. Why didn't the superintendent? Could the superintendent have said, I want this student to have this grade? Could he have said that?
He could, but he'd be breaking the law.
He'd be breaking the law. Who assigns grades?
Principal.
The principal.
Only in North Carolina. If Dr. Steve Laws was sitting here, that's who I was on the phone with just prior to class. If he was sitting here tonight when we teach this course for our doctorals, that'd be the first thing he'd tell you is, I can't tell the principal one thing or the other. I can tell them to be cautious and make sure they follow the law and that they can document what they've done, but I can't tell them to fail or only person in the state that can assign a kid a grade is the school principal, period. So you could say politics might have to be considered, but it did not have a hand in decision making. The superintendent did not say, I want this decision or this grade. That is not accurate.
Well, then my thing is, this is an initial thought or reaction. This is not exactly what happened. So I was under the impression that we look at this and read it and come up with what our reactions
It
are.
was put in the case to confuse you. Now, I'm gonna tell you now that these cases are gonna have a lot of stuff in them that are just there to trip you up and to catch you out and call you out. Remember, we only follow the law and policy. The rest of this stuff is just there to confuse you. The last case is not even gonna be set in America. It's not even gonna be in the United States. And the whole point of it is to call you out and to distract you from the facts of the case. When you do a case study in school law, we only go on the facts of the case. We only go on law. We have to put aside our personal feelings or what we think, or we have to be careful that there's a lot of stuff in these cases that are designed to distract you from the core issues. And this one, that's what this one is about, Alex, quite honestly, is
Gotcha.
this one is there to distract you, is to get you not to focus on what the law is. Because it's never clean and clear. All these incidents happen in school. They don't happen in isolation. You got a bus that's late, you know, a kid that's out here with a nosebleed. You got 1,000 things going on, but you must focus in on due process. You must focus in on following the law. You can't just say stop, time out. Let me think about this for a while. You know, turn the phones off and stop that scream that's coming through the radio. No, you've got to be able to work under pressure. There was a recent case at Gardner Webb where a student appealed a grade based on distraction during exam. And the response from the college or the school that the student was in was, we did that intentionally. You're training to be a nurse. We expect you to be able to work under pressure. We intentionally do those things. That is part of the process. If you couldn't get through that, how could you nurse in a critical situation? And so these case studies will contain things in them that confuse you or grab your attention that have no bearing on the outcome of the case, what the law is. So you need to be critical when you read these things. Does this really matter or not? The superintendent did not give him any direction one way or the other. Didn't say, I want this to happen. He just simply cautioned him to be careful, which means follow the law, which is good advice, by the way. Continue.
All right, and the last two we had were you cannot fail a student in a course for one assignment. We already went over that earlier when you stopped me. And then teachers in the wrong, professional misconduct.
Excellent. Excellent. Your last two are dead on. Good job.
Questions of the group, some things we thought we needed to know. Obviously, what are Bobby's other grades? Number
Is
two.
that relevant here?
No, it's not. As I'm talking through this, I'm probably going to find that a lot of these are not.
Yeah, it's not relevant. This is about one assignment, one homework assignment by state definition, one homework assignment counting more than 50% of the yearly grade.
Second question, is it fair to count 50% from one assignment? We already went over that.
Don't get involved in fair, by the way. I've told you that before. That's where you go in the fall of the year to eat a corn dog and ride the Ferris wheel. We only do law here. We do law and policy. Your second case study is going to be about a fair. I mean, what the superintendent's doing is completely equitable in your second case study. What you would call fair, what I refer to as equitable, but he's breaking the law. So fair does not enter into a case study, a legal case study.
Has this occurred before? What was the manner in which she interrogated him? Did Bobby exhibit other behaviors?
All right, stop again. Back in the 80s, when we were first developing notions of due process. Now, when did students in schools get due process? What year? What case? Somebody, anybody? I've already covered this. What year did kids get due process rights in schools?
1969.
1969. What was the case?
Tinker versus Des Moines.
That is correct. Kids only got due process in 1969, and all through the 70s, we didn't know what to do about it. But then in the late 70s, early 80s, we started doing discipline programs. And the first one that North Carolina centered on, and it was done in Gaston County as well, was assertive discipline. And it lasted until 1984, I guess it was. So it was around for a few years. It was called Lee Cantor assertive discipline. And the basis of that due process or that disciplinary system was the number. It didn't matter what the kid did. It was the number of infractions that they committed, kind of like the 3 strikes you're out rule with felonies. But what happened in 1986 with the Chatta case was that was all thrown out. That was unconstitutional. That violated your equal protection law and your Fifth Amendment rights. Your equal protection law. What that means is we have to discipline a kid based on this incident. If we're disciplining him, if we're due processing a kid, it has to be based on the merits of this incident only. We can't say we're going to take Alex out back and shoot him. Well, all he did was smoke. Yeah, but he's been smoking every day for the last 6 months. No. Every incident has to stand on its own in due process. You can't bring in, but last week, he peed his pants last week, and the week before that, he slammed the teacher's hand in the door. You can't bring everything that he's done since kindergarten in. Every incident has to stand on its own in a due process case. That is one of the things you have to realize is it doesn't matter if you've seen Bobby in the office every day for the last 2 months. When he comes in today, we have to adjudicate him. We have to due process him on what Bobby did today. That is the law on due process. We can't bring everything that he's done back for years and years and years. Now, I told you last week, full disclosure, Bobby's probably a turd. He's probably aggravated this teacher all year long. And, but we can't factor all that other stuff in. We can't do that. We're not allowed to in due process. We're not allowed to bring in everything that he's ever done. We can only adjudicate him on the case of he cheated on this homework assignment. He turned in his brother's work. Period. That's the end of story. All right, let's move on.
Okay. Other questions of the group? What are the grading policies in the county versus the school? Is there any discrepancies there?
All right, let's stop again. Can there be any discrepancies there? No. The school does not. Who sets the county grading policy? The superintendent, the principal? No. Who sets the county's grading policy? That would be the Board of Education in Gaston County. Who adopts the code of conduct in Gaston County? That would be the school board. Can a school have their own code of conduct? No. Can a school have their own grading policy? No. Cannot. The school has to be a consistent policy across your county. Why? Why does the grading policy have to be the same for 8th graders in every school in Gaston County?
Because it's the law.
Equitable, and it's the law.
It's equitable and it's the law. That is exactly right, because it's equitable and it's the law that says that there is a standard grading policy for every grade across the county. The schools can't be different than the counties, period. The school does not adopt a grading policy. The county does. The principal can't even adopt one. The superintendent can't adopt. The Board of Education adopts the grading policy. The Board of Education also adopts the code of conduct. And that's the two documents that we're most concerned with here. We're going to get to the code of conduct one later. All right, here we go.
All right. Another one talking about being equitable, would the punishment be the same for all? Was there
All right,
contact?
so what are the standards that we're looking at there? Is the punishment equitable for all? What are our two standards, legal standards there? I told you to make sure it's even in the directions for the case. What are those two standards called?
Arbitrary and capricious.
Arbitrary and capricious. What is arbitrary?
Fair.
No, don't use that term.
Well, the law,
Arbitrary means that everybody gets the same.
Treatment.
well, equitable, I guess, yeah.
Again, Wood catches me and Daphne out behind the gym smoking. He sends Daphne back to class and he shoots me. All right. The first standard he's violated is arbitrary. Why do you let Daphne go and decided to discipline me? Now, the second standard that he's violated is capricious. Why is his action against me capricious?
Which is based on,
Because it was impulsive.
It's harsh. It's
Yeah.
much
Way too
harsher.
much.
Yeah.
There you go. The punishment does not fit the crime. Nowhere in the Gaston County Code of Conduct does it say if you catch Dale smoking, you can shoot him. It has parameters, a minimum and a maximum that you can do to me. But I'm guessing that shooting me is not in that parameter. That would seem a little harsh. And so, would the punishment be the same for all is really a question that you should frame in the notion of, is it arbitrary or capricious? And as we should already have figured out, it violates both of those standards. Mostly it violates the capricious standard, and we'll talk more about that. All right, continue on.
next question we had was there contact with the parent? Was there an opportunity for him to redo it? Does the assignment align with the standards for that course? Another thing that we thought was interesting was, why does the teacher immediately when the initial meeting happened bring a union rep? And what is the teacher's history, or possibly have any type of EVOS data on that?
All right, so the last three that you've got on that one, it'd be good to know, but really doesn't affect the outcome of the case. Not really germane to the topic that we have here, but I won't quibble with those. That's all right. The salient question is the fourth one up from the bottom is, does he have a chance to redo it? Again, it goes back to your policy. I can pull up the code of conduct from Charlotte Mecklenburg and show you what the parameters are. But every district kind of does that on your own. Somebody should be pulling up the code of conduct from Gaston County right now.
So
And speak to what the actual punishment is for cheating or misrepresentation. So somebody pull that up right quick, and we'll go to that in a few minutes. All right, continue on.
All right, I don't know how to show my full screen and present at the same time, so I'm gonna just do it this way if that's okay with everybody.
That's fine.
Okay, so to address the 4 ethical paradigms, first we have justice. We talk about the fairness, equity, and justice. We feel that it wasn't equal treatment for Bobby to have the one assignment be more than half of his grade. We said that it definitely is an equal treatment. Arbitrary and capricious. Teacher was arbitrary and capricious because she abused her power as teacher over Bobby when giving him a failing grade for the class for one assignment, and the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Said, did Bobby give the teacher a reason to make her decide to give him a failing grade? And then when we go to critique, we talked about power that the teacher had the power over Bobby. If we talk about from the principal's point of view, he's not showing his hand for power. So should he consider Bobby's classwork in other grades? Incident and offense type versus action type. We said the action of the punishment doesn't meet the offense.
That's correct.
The corrupted morals, teacher thinks it is okay to fail student for one assignment.
Yep.
And then human rights, fair grading should be the right to all students.
That's correct. That would be 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law.
And then under care for concern and connection, the teacher does not is not concerned about the best interests of Bobby. She has no connection to the student, obviously, since she feels like it's okay to give him that failing grade. And even though this is not really should be considered, this also keeps him from baseball, which gives him the opportunity and that of other students to get future scholarships.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one in a minute.
Okay.
Good point.
And then nurtured and encouraged versus achievement. If she truly encouraged him, why was there not steps and check-ins and communication of progress during the project? Obviously, because he got the failing grade, there was no achievement, and she was part of that, of no achievement, and there was no nurturing there. And then no one benefits from the teacher's decision. Bobby doesn't, and other students don't. Student is hurt, and so is the team, and the long-term effects is there's no scholarship. And then under profession for accountability for student academic and social success, the principal is ultimately responsible for student academic success and therefore social successes as well. The model principles of self-awareness, reflective practice, transparency, and ethical behavior. This isn't happening at the school because the teacher and principal should be self-aware that the grading policy is wrong. They don't reflect on practice, especially if teachers are assigning the same project 2 years later. There's no.
That's a good point. Hey, I like that one.
Thank you.
Heather gets a gold star tonight. I love that. That's a good catch on curriculum. Excellent.
Thank you. There's obviously no transparency and no communication. And then teacher seems like she's wrong since teacher seems like she must be wrong since she's going straight to setting up a union rep and bringing them to the meeting. Safeguard equity and diversity. Let's see, principal is not going, so this is happening and is not doing this since it's happening in the first place. I'm sorry. And then consider consequences of decision. The principal should weigh the decision and consequences, pros and cons of allowing the decision of the teacher or changing it. And is this in the best interest of students? Is failing him best for him and others? And considering the principal needs to consider lasting effects of all stakeholders.
Okay, so would we say in summation here that the teacher has failed all 4 of the ethical paradigms? Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
All right. All right, let's remember that and move on.
Heather, will you make it bigger? Okay, so my part was on the issues of due process and the standard of arbitrary and capricious. So we talked about the substantive due process, and I already know that I need to change the wording on this, but is the grading policy equitable? And the answer to that was no, the grading policy is not.
Let's be clear here in the difference between substantive and procedural due process. Substance is what does the county grading policy say? It is equitable. It is the same for everybody. Where the failing occurred in this case was on the procedural end. How did you carry it out? The grading policy is equitable for everybody because it's the same for everybody. It has to be by law. That's what substantive due process means. This is what you're supposed to get. This is our policy. Everybody has to have the same policy. That's the law. That's what due process law is all about. That it's the same for everybody. It can't be different at Cramerton than it is at Lowell. Can't be. That would violate substantive due process. That's why substantive is what are you supposed to get? So is the grading policy equitable? Yes, for Gaston County schools. The board has passed it. It's the same for everybody. Everybody's the same. Now, the second bullet there is everybody supposed to be treated the same? Yes, that's the rules of due process. That's what substantive means. Now, when we adjudicate whether it happened or not, that's the procedure. Was it carried out as intended? So that's where the procedural due process comes in. Was the grading policy applied as it was intended? No, couldn't have been. You can't assign more than 50% of the final yearly grade on a homework assignment. When the maximum is 10% in aggregate for all homework all year long. So that's where you do your audit here between what are they supposed to get and what did they get. That's what you have to do with substantive and procedural. That's why you have to understand both halves of it. That's why when you did your exceptional children and you did your special pops audit, what were they supposed to get? We've got this program. We've got a gifted program. What are they supposed to get? What are they actually getting? What is the actual procedural piece of it? Are they getting what they're supposed to get? Again, that's the due process. What are they supposed to get? Are they getting? That's the two halves. And where you get in trouble as a school administrator is this is what they're supposed to get, just like with your intervention team and MTSS. And remember who's on the hook for that. That would be the principal because it's a school-based committee. What does your MTSS, for my purposes, it doesn't matter what the content or the substance is. What matters is, are we delivering it or not? And that's when you get in trouble. You can't just say, well, this is what our county provides. Well, that's all well and good. Did you actually provide it then? Well, that's another question. In reality, did we follow that policy? Did we do what we were supposed to do in our procedure? That's the rub on due process. So is the grading policy equitable? Yep, it's the same for everybody all across Gaston County. Are all students treated the same? Yep, they're supposed to be treated the same. Now, in practice, did that happen? That's the question here.
Okay. So then I guess the whole thing then is, with this case, was procedural, mainly where the process is followed. Yes. So the principal ultimately has the authority in assigning the grades, and teachers do not assign the final grade. So the error, of course, is in the grading policy, and the grading policy obviously wasn't equitable, or the student wouldn't have failed for a homework or an out-of-class assignment. And then the teacher also should have gone to the principal first with this decision if it had such a big impact on his grade that would cause him to go to summer school, taking the baseball or the sports out of the situation. And then was the parent called in? Did they? Because if you're following due process, you have to go through. Was it, unbiased? Did you have the opportunity? Did the student have the opportunity to present reasons? Did the parent have the opportunity to respond? And was the teacher unbiased? And did she give the student, like I said, the opportunity to present reasons or evidence? So we said the teacher was definitely capricious. She was impulsive. She was arbitrary because there was no system or reason in her choice to fail the student, other than apparently her misunderstanding of the grading policy. And that the school itself, the principal, the SIT team should take a hard look at the underlying questions and the fact which this was based on, which was the grading policy. So I think the main thing here was the procedures were not followed.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
No, that's exactly what that's what the exact case is about. And now let's let's pause here. You can stop your share for a minute and we'll come back. Let's pause here and get some kind of get some things out of the way. This is not a case where we need to go back to the school improvement team and look at the grading policy. What's the school improvement team going to do about the grading policy? The county adopts the policy. This is not an issue of, well, did the principal cover? State law says the principal covered this. It was in the handbook in the first day. This is not a principal problem. This is not a principal problem. This is not a policy problem. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not any of those things. This is when you have a teacher that goes rogue and decides Bobby's been a pain in my behind all year long and I'm going to get Bobby. That's what this case is about. You are changing your lens. You are changing from one side of the desk to the other. You are auditioning through this program and then in your summer assignments to become a school administrator. You no longer work with students. Now you work with adults. Sometimes adults, just like kids, don't do the right thing. That's what this case is about. It's not about, did the teacher know or did she miss it? This is about none of that. The teacher saw her shot and she took it. That's what this case is about. Now, where it gets even more deeper and heavier and more financially liable is she broke federal law. Somebody explain to me how she broke federal law.
That was the zero
Tolerance. There you go.
Yeah.
What is zero tolerance? The law says, federal law says, Office of Civil Rights is the enforcement wing of the federal government that says, you can't just say, if you do this, you get that. If Bobby had brought a gun to school and he didn't discharge it, he just brought it, he would have got less punishment than this. Outside of physically or sexually abusing Bobby, this is the most punishment that you can give. What's the most punishment that you can give a student? Is to exclude them from school for a year. Is failing 8th grade not excluding a kid for the year? According to federal law, it is. Does it matter that you give him the opportunity to go to an alternative school or to summer school? Does that negate the fact that you did an illegal zero tolerance exclusion?
Not to the feds.
Not to the feds. That is exact. They actually write that in the law. It says it doesn't matter if you give them an alternative assignment. It doesn't matter if you give them summer school. You have still excluded him from school for a year with no due process. That is against the law. You cannot do that. Bobby could have brought a gun and got less punishment than this. Failing Bobby for the year is a year-long exclusion. That's the maximum that we can give a kid. And that's only after we go through 7 levels of due process and a court case in civil court. These automatically go through every chain. The school makes a decision. Superintendent supports it. Then they have a hearing. Then that goes to the board. The board has a separate hearing. And then it goes, and after all of those, all along the way, and sometimes there's a DTM in a community, there's up to between 5 and 7 different appeal systems before, and then it goes to civil court, goes to juvenile court, and a judge makes a decision on it. Did Bobby get any of that? No, he didn't get anything. He got put out of school for a whole year and got nothing. Whether he's an athlete, with summer school, none of that matters. Bobby got put out of school for a year with zero due process. We have a violation of federal law on zero tolerance. We have a violation of the state grading policy. We have a violation of the local policy. We have a violation of substantive and procedural due process all along the way. This is simply the teacher did a bad thing. Now, please don't be one of those nitwits who says, well, you know, we'll support the teacher in public, but behind closed doors, we'll tell her not to do this again. Please don't be that stupid person. That falls under the category when your mama told you you were about 5 or 6, if your friend jumped off the garage, would you jump off with them? The answer is no. If the teacher wants to sacrifice her life, liberty, freedom, or house or whatever, that's fine. But you can't do that. You can't support this. The district won't allow you to support this. We have created so many violations of federal, state law, and local policy here with this one teacher doing this one thing. That she ran to her union rep, North Carolina's not a union state, that she was basically to try to protect herself because she knew she had violated the law. She's looking for protection. Now, if we were a union state, would her union be able to protect her? That would be no. If you have violated the law, the union can't even protect you then. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. Now, again, full disclosure, Bobby's a turd. But even turds get due process. You can't break the law, even when kids, again, it goes back under that notion of kids that need love the most deserve it the least. A lot of times, that's what Bobby falls under here. But we can't get into that we discipline by who you are thing. Because we know that, you know, what my doctoral student in finance refers to as BIPOC, people of color, indigenous people, the other, they always end up on the bad end of the stick on these cases. And if it were, but that's immaterial to this case. But the notion here is we have to uphold everybody's rights. That if we allow this to happen, pretty soon it becomes identifiable that it's our least able kids, it's our minority kids, it's our poorest kids. That the law has to be upheld for everybody, and that in this case, that Bobby is a pain in her behind is immaterial. We only judge Bobby on this case. Now, I asked somebody, what does your code of conduct in Gaston County say happens if the kid turns in somebody else's work? Plagiarism.
So looked up 2 things in the Gaston County conduct. Plagiarism no longer comes up in the code of conduct, which I found interesting. I don't know if anybody else found the word plagiarism, but cheating does.
Yeah.
So the word cheating does, and it's relatively vague. But then the way that they're weighting this test, this assignment, would be like a project or a test grade. And that in itself automatically under Gaston County policy is a reteach, retest.
That
so
is
he
correct.
would get the opportunity to do that. I mean, I know it is a homework assignment, but
Yeah.
But according to that policy, but
Well,
anyway.
You have to be careful. And the reason I asked that, and I can show you the one from Charlotte Mac, and it says, but what we've got to be careful of, even if we realize that this is completely out of control, what are we going to do? And your district sets the policy on what you're going to do, and it's going to go one way or the other. Now, listen carefully to this piece. In Charlotte Mecklenburg, it goes one way or the other, and in Gaston it goes one way or the other, but it can't go both. Let's be clear on this. You can treat this as a disciplinary incident, and the most that you can give Bobby is 1 day of in-school suspension, and you allow him to redo the project. Or you can count that project as a 0 in terms of the other and go that direction, but you can't give him a disciplinary action and an academic action. Now, most districts have gone the route, and Charlotte has too, of can't harm him academically. We'll give him, you know, he's got to be able to make up the work. We'll give him the up to 1 day. We can go anywhere from a conference to a 1 day in-school suspension is what we're going to do, but he gets to redo the work because we don't want to hurt kids academically. We understand. What happens if a kid fails a grade? K through 8, and Bobby's an 8th grader, by the way. I can show you how to read the case and understand that. What percent of kids who fail between grades K and 8, what percent of them ever graduate from high school? About 12%.
Oh,
That's correct. Why do you think we've stopped failing kids? That was, you know, that was, you know, school to prison pipeline. One of my doctorals is working on that as well. And so Ricky Weeks is doing school to prison pipeline, and that's chief among the things that happens. Districts that still allow kids to be punished academically and fail kids for the year, it's a school to prison pipeline. Only 12% of kids graduate from high school that fail a grade. So what are all districts have been shifting to in the last, most specifically, they were already headed this way before the pandemic, but what has the pandemic hastened school districts moved to? Away from anything that penalizes a kid academically. The state has even waived test scores, have they not, in testing? Why do you think they did that? What was the purpose of that? They didn't want to penalize kids academically. And that should have always been that way, but unfortunately for some school districts that are hard-headed, it's taken a pandemic to wake them up to realize that you should never be punishing a kid. I mean, you can discipline a kid, you can give them a punishment, but you shouldn't take it out on them academically. That's the whole notion here.
the cheating in the policy, it actually does, I'm going back and reading it, it does say ranging from individual classroom disciplinary action to in-school disciplinary to 10 days OSS and or alternative, does not say anything about academic. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're heading in that direction here. But please remember, if Bobby had brought a gun, we would have had a DTM, we'd have done we'd have done all the paperwork, we would have had an appeal, we'd have had a hearing, we'd have had 2 hearings, we'd have had a hearing at school level, district level, we'd been before the board, we'd had all these things that Bobby got none of. But in the end, we've got to figure out what to do with Bobby. And so my argument tonight to you is, when we're deciding what we're actually going to do with Bobby, failing Bobby and giving him the 0 would not be my option. Now, again, that's not legal. According, you got to go by what your handbook says. But I would advocate that as emerging school administrators, that you get it in your mind now that treat it as a disciplinary infraction, give him his 1 day ISS and have him make up the project and go on about his business. This is much ado about nothing. This should have been a gnat in the summertime when you're eating a watermelon. You don't even notice it. But we've made this just be a huge thing when we didn't have to. But even when we're correcting it, don't compound one bad thing with a dumb thing on your part. You know, let Bobby make up the assignment, give him his 1 day of ISS and move on. I'm advocating, don't work toward restorative justice. Don't penalize kids academically. That's a fool's errand. And as you are emerging administrators, it's up to your generation of administrators to understand that. Mine has kicked and screamed into it. I can tell you that they don't like that at all, but it was never good for kids. Never. All right, we're back on. Go back to your slideshow. I bet some of y'all are wishing you hadn't volunteered to be first now.
So I had the slide of what should the principal's course of action be. Above all, we thought that he has to ensure due process. You cannot fail a student in a course for one assignment. So the due process is the biggest thing that the principal has to follow here. Maybe look at the student handbook, because according to the case study, it says as part of the school's policy to maintain standards of personal honesty, cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher. So
All right,
maybe
let me stop you there. How do you know that that only means on that assignment, not for the year? How do you know that it doesn't mean that he could fail for the year? Because that'd be a violation of federal law. That'd be a zero tolerance. That's exactly how you know that doesn't, it doesn't have to say may fail the assignment. That's understood because it's against the federal law to put a policy in that says if you cheat, you'll fail for the year. You can't do that. That excludes due process. And so again, he may fail that assignment. That's why I said some school districts are still in that mode that you can either give him his one-day ISS or he can fail the assignment. What I'm saying is most districts are moving to that, give him the one-day ISS, don't penalize his academic grade. The pandemic has focused this on, that's a fool's errand. That's my notice to you is you need to start thinking in terms of restorative justice, moving away from the old any punishment that harms them academically. You need to stop. You know, you go to the doctor and you say, "Doc, it hurts when I move my arm like this." And what does the doctor say to you? Don't move your arm like that. Well, that's what I'm telling you. Don't punish kids academically. You're only hurting yourself when you do that. Continue.
Okay. The principal probably needs to have a conference with Bobby and inform Bobby's parents of the situation that's going on as well. We know that Bobby said he cheated because he was too busy playing baseball to complete the assignment. But if you speak with Bobby and the parents, maybe there's some other reason going on there. And then he can inform all of the parties of the decision concerning the failing grade. And we thought that he needs to let Bobby redo the assignment and maybe not make the assignment have the weight that it did initially, but maybe give him partial credit because Bobby did cheat and he needs to have some consequences for his action.
Well, again, I could live with that, but my charge to you or my argument to you is I think it's much more preferable to just let him redo it for full credit and give him his one-day ISS. But again, we're struggling as a profession. We're struggling with that to get to that point of view that discipline is discipline and academics are academics, that we shouldn't be mixing the two. We know that we can't do double jeopardy. We can't punish them on both sides. We understand that. That's against the law. But I'm hoping that we can kind of turn this battleship in the notion that no, just have him redo the assignment. If he gets an A or if he gets an F, whatever he gets, he has to redo the assignment. But just do a simple disciplinary action against him. That's this. I mean, if he was shooting spit wads, you wouldn't take points off of his grade. This is just a disciplinary infraction. And I think Heather made a great point a while ago is why is the teacher doing the same assignments over and over that a kid can cheat? You might want to look at that as well, reflective practice. Why is it that, we know that we quit, giving the same test over and over again. Why? So kids, wouldn't just get the test from previous years and study it. Well, it's the same thing with assignments. So again, it's part of it's reflective practice for us as school administrators. Let's start looking a little bit differently at these kinds of things.
And we said if the teacher doesn't comply with that, then maybe put her on an action plan, with her bringing the union rep to their first meeting. They kind of can anticipate that she might not like that decision. So maybe some type of action plan with checking in on all her grading and her policies that she does and how she puts her grades in. The principal should check in on that. And we covered that this is not a SIT issue, but we put that the SIT probably needs to address that student handbook policy, and just make sure that everybody is in alignment with the county policy, and that maybe the principal could do some PD on that to make sure all the teachers know exactly what the policy is.
Well, again, that's done at the work day, and that's done already. I'm not sure why the SIT team needs to be, you know, one of the things that we've got to stop doing. You can stop your share for a minute here. One of the things we've got to stop doing in the school business as school administrators is punishing the many for the sins of the few. If you have a teacher who comes in late every morning, is it appropriate to get on the loudspeaker and say, everybody come to work on time? Is it appropriate to post a stupid note in the workroom that says, you know, come to work on time? If you got a teacher who comes in late, who do you need to talk to? That would be the teacher that comes in late. I had a football coach, social studies teacher. Well, I referred to him, he was being paid as a social studies teacher. I would argue that it would be a misnomer to have called him a social studies teacher. And he wasn't much of a football coach either. But he always whined and whittled his way into first period planning. And of course, I put a stop to that immediately. The schedule will be about what's good for students and making sure we have the right things done. It won't be coach wants to come in, so he didn't have to show up till 9 o'clock every morning. And so I gave him first period class, and I put him on on car duty with me out front of the school, so I'd know he was there or he wasn't there. Did I want to be around him? Not particularly. You know, stupid is catching, by the way, and so I didn't really want to be around him that much. It is one of those transferable things. But the point is, he was the only one. Why would I want to talk to anybody else about their behavior, or about his behavior? I'm not going to punish them because he comes in late. And so I'm not going to involve the entire school and have everybody turn in their grade, but do all that stuff over this one teacher that went rogue on us. We can't punish the many for the sins of the few. We've got to address her and her behavior. That's in personnel law, by the way. You get yourself in trouble, you start whipping everybody over one person. That's the issue here. Is no, don't involve your SIT. Don't do all these. Address the issue, which is with this teacher. Now, so this group says that y'all are going to put her on an action plan. All right, so that's their vote. So group one votes action plan. I'm writing your votes down. So group one votes action plan. All right, continue.
I think that we're finished.
I think you're done. Well, you did a good job.
Yes.
I'm pleased. For the first case study out, you made a respectable showing. I didn't throw anything. I don't believe I used any profanity. Well, just TV profanity maybe. So that's pretty good.
2 or 3 times, Dr. Lynn.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say, you might as well throw them something.
Oh, it's tough. The thing that the law is unforgiving, and Alex makes a good point. I might as well throw him something, but the law is unforgiving. Boy, when you go to court, they just eat you. They eat you up. If you've ever had to go, they just eat you up. It's unforgiving, and talk to you badly. Because what is the expectation when you go to court and with cases like this or something similar? What is the expectation for the administrator that in court? They expect that you know the law. You don't get a pass when you go to court. I can tell you that. You do not get a pass. It gets really ugly. I had a case. Well, I had to go a lot when I was in the central office because I was the one that had to go most of the time. But I had a case when I was a high school principal I had to go over. And it wasn't a criminal case or civil or whatever. It had gone through the process of where this kid was placed. in terms of, was a international student who came in and he was appealing his placement, his grade placement. And it went through every level all the way up, and it got to court. And boy, I tell you what, the judge was not kind. And we hadn't done anything wrong or hadn't violated the kid's rights or done anything. We had adjudicated the transcript. The guidance department had done that, and everything was good. But now, when you go to court, it does not go like you think it's going to go. They don't talk to you like your long lost friends or any of that stuff. They wear you out, and everything is not like you think it's going to be. It's not a group of friends getting together and making collaborative decisions. The other side accuses you of everything, from slavery to, being a bad person. I mean, it's quite shocking what you have to go through, and you better be prepared. It won't go easy. I can tell you that. That's unfortunate, but and if you stay in the business long enough, you will have to go to court, as I've told you. And if you move to the central office and that happens to be your purview, every one of these complaints will eventually end up in juvenile court. You'll have to go sit through that, and you will be disparaged. Trust me, it won't go well. All right, who's group 2? Who's our next group? Bud's your group. You said y'all wanted to go. Go.
Yes, sir. So Van, I believe you have the presentation ready. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me get that. Okay, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first 2 slides. So we started out with a summary of the incident after we read through it, and we just kind of summarized it together as a group. So we said the student Bobby completed a social studies project, but upon turning in the assignment, his teacher noticed it looked familiar. After further investigation, the teacher concluded that Bobby had copied the work from his brother who had previously taken the class. As a consequence, Bobby's teacher decided to give Bobby a failing grade for the semester. The student handbook states that giving a failing grade is permissible for 1 single assignment. The hesitation to uphold this decision also comes from the fact that Bobby's uncle is a sports sponsor as well as an outspoken school board member. So we actually talked a lot about if that was what the handbook was saying or if it was not, as far as the 1 single assignment or failing for the whole semester. But as you had said earlier, the law tells us that it is that. So that teacher did break the law as far as taking that kind of out of context, obviously way out of context. And we'll talk about later about how we feel about the teacher's misinterpretation or interpretation, if that's a possibility, but that's kind of where we were going with that when we started off with that. But the fact is that does break the law. And so that was our summary of the incident. And then we move on to the points of focus. So the powers and duties of a principal has final decision on grades. They are to improve instruction, community spirit, to discipline students. And then we started thinking about FERPA because of the whole, even the idea that the uncle would even be involved in this. We started thinking about the laws about sharing student records. So the FERPA is the protection of sharing student records by school personnel to individuals that do not have a legitimate educational interest in the information. We talked a lot about that too, about, sponsorships and things like that are not a legitimate or ethical reason for that individual to even be a part of.
That is correct. It's good. That's a good point. This one's going to come up, and excuse me, Savannah, this one's going to come up in our 3rd case study. We can't talk to even parents in our school. We can't talk about somebody else's child. even if it's a parent in our school. But definitely an uncle or somebody like that out in the community, absolutely, we can't talk to them,
Right.
not at all.
That's kind of where our minds went first, honestly, when we read about that influence of that person or why that was even.
That's why I said that's a non-factor. It can't be. We can't let that be a factor. That was my point in the first one. We can't let that be a factor because we're not allowed to. We can't talk to the uncle or the pharmacist or, you know, the fellow over to Feed and Seed. We can't be talking to people out in the community about this. And when they come in and if they broach us about it, we just have to tell them this is a confidential matter. We can't be talking about this. They'd skin us on FERPA. That is correct. So it can't be a political issue, and it can't be part you know, a conversation. No. This is a single issue that has to be handled in a discreet manner. We can't even talk to, you know, this parent about another kid in the building that affects their kid. We can't, if two kids are fighting, we can't tell one parent what the other kid got. We're not allowed to do that. Continue. Excellent.
Okay, and then the last point of focus that we talked about was the handbook, of course, the student code of conduct, the first thing we referenced, and we discussed about the parent and student signing it, because that's usually policy that they're aware of those policies. But since we determined that the teacher did misuse that, you know, that's not what the book meant, that really doesn't have any relevance now. But that is something that we know is usually policy for the parent and student to sign that they've seen that. And then cheating with the result of a failing grade by the teacher, we have for that. And again, just they'll talk later in the rest of the slides of we tried to anticipate what the teacher might say. You know, is this a teacher who truly, you know, misunderstood, which comes with a lot of other issues that they're going to get to later? Or is that a deliberate action, which we will expand on later as well, but that's why we have that under that code of conduct part.
Okay, for due process, we talked about whether it was substantive or procedural. And as we established earlier, the rules and the policy in the handbook are fair in and of themselves, but the way that it was carried out was not fair. The teacher violated the procedural part of it.
That is correct.
And then we talked about standards of arbitrary and capricious. The definition, a willful and unreasonable action without consideration or in disregard of facts of the law. The consequences that were assigned by the teacher could be viewed as very unreasonable with no consideration to the student. But we discussed whether or not we saw it as to be deliberate disregard of the law. We also talked about if she was doing this to other students, does this align with the district grading policy? And was this her own personal policy? And through that discussion, we realized that it did not align with the district grading policy. And this was something that she was just doing on her own.
Can teachers have their own personal grading policy?
No, she was on the road.
Absolutely
like
not.
Yeah,
No.
we didn't we didn't use the word, but basically we had established at that point that she had gone rogue, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me give you an example here. You notice that in all of your shells and Blackboard for your classes so far, you've had 3 that under course. What
I think I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
you see the grading policy each time. You have the Gardner Webb one, and then you have the points under course information or whatever that one is. Course overview. That's it. Course overview. Who do you think sets that in all the shelves?
You do.
That would be me. Why do I do that? Why do I have to do that? Why am I required to do that? It looks pretty simple, doesn't it? You just say, all right, this is how many assignments you got, and this is how many points you can get. But who has to set and factor in? Who has to set and look at, all right, the Gardner Webb grading policy says that this stuff counts this much. And who has to sit and figure out how many assignments of different types will equal that percentage? Who has to sit and do that? That would be me. Because I am charged with carrying out what? The policy that the university, which is like the school district, sets. I am charged with carrying that out. So I have done all the math and the number of assignments, and I have to sit and do that to make sure that the grading policy comes out right. So my point is, can one of the folks that work with me that teaches a class, like Dr. Neal last semester or Dr. Tobias, can they go in and say, well, I don't like that, and change that to something else? That would be no. And what do I do to make sure that that grading policy is in that course overview? I build their shells and have to make sure that it's there. Now, the instructions to them are very simple. You can add some of your own stuff, but you can't do what? Take any of mine out. So and one of the things that cannot be changed, when I say you can add some of your stuff, they can add their stuff under the weekly class schedule of materials that they want to use. Can they change any of the grade center? Grading, what stuff is weighted, what it counts, how many assignments, can they change any of those things? That would be no. So you will have a similar position to I have now when you're a school principal. What has to be your hard and fast rule with your teachers? This is the grading policy adopted by the board. I have interpreted it for you if it needed interpreting. If it didn't, we'll sit down and interpret it. But you cannot do what? You cannot change the grading policy. You cannot change the weighting of assignments. You cannot change the number of assignments. This is the policy, period. This is not up for debate. So the notion of, does a teacher have their own grading policy? That is not allowable. That is not legal. We cannot allow them that luxury, even if we thought they were doing the right thing. And that's one of the things that we get into with our second case study. Even if we think that it was the right thing, we have a choice between what we think is the right thing and the legal thing. Which one do we always have to choose?
Legal.
We always have to choose the legal thing. Now, I would argue in our second case study that the superintendent's trying to be a hero and he's got a good plan and a good idea, but it's not legal. Sorry. And that's one of the things that, for some notion we have in school administration, that as long as I'm doing the right thing, it's all going to work out in the end. That's not true. No, that's just not true. If you break nobody can give you permission to break the law. And it doesn't matter what your cause is or how wonderful it is. You have to understand that there's some hard and fast things in our business. Grading policy is one of them. You cannot believe how parents get stirred up over valedictorian, salutatorian, grades, class rank, those kinds of things. You better believe there'll be people following behind you all the time. When you become high school principals, you will be sick and tired of it by the first month of school, of people complaining about the grading and making sure that everybody follows that grading policy to a T. That there'll be no deviation, because parents watch that more than they watch their TV or their phones. It's incredible how much parents are involved in that stuff nowadays. And the first time you get caught not following the policy, they will crucify you. That's why grading and this case study comes first. It is the first law that under the duties and responsibilities of the principal, and it's one that you will get beat up over the most of anything that you get beat up over is over grading. And you better understand that there is no wiggle room. There is no gray area here. The district sets the policy and you and your teachers will follow it to a T. Period. Continue, please.
That's all I had. Wood.
All right. So we got our 4 ethical paradigms, and essentially we established that this teacher violated all 4 of them.
Yeah.
But justice, we saw that Bobby was definitely not getting justice here, just in the fact that cheating on one assignment should not result in the failure of the entire course. And we talked about that 0 tolerance exclusion. I'm still interested in why the federal definition of exclusion, I believe I'm saying that right, the state and federal definitions do not align.
They don't.
Yeah, that interests me. That's something I learned. So anyway, maybe we can talk about that later. But
Well, as
yeah.
I pointed out to you, and I'm going to point out next week, since 2014 in the state of North Carolina, Power School collects data for the Office of Civil Rights. We used to file the reports separately and collect the data separately. We no longer do that since 8 years ago. We've never gotten around to reconciling the two, but you're exactly right. But unfortunately, when we do our hierarchy that I've already taught you about, which one comes first?
Nope.
Federal law.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What's our hierarchy? Federal law comes first.
Yeah.
Then state law, then board policy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's the way it works. And so federal law supersedes state law. And so that we know that our Power School collects data for Office of Civil Rights. Which law do we have to follow?
Yeah, it's going to be the federal for sure.
We have to follow the federal law. That is correct. Now they're very careful to point that out in our handbook, in our disciplinary data manual. They're very careful to point out that since 2014, that Power School is the data collection device for the Office of Civil Rights for federal law compliance. And what that I'm supposed to teach you, and you're supposed to know is we have to follow federal law first. And if it's more restrictive than state law, then it just is. And it is in this case. It absolutely is. Their definition is much broader of what an exclusion is. That is correct.
So definitely not getting justice there. We said care. I'm going to say that Laura and Savannah are much nicer than I am. Basically, we're going to suggest that this teacher is put on an action plan, but I'm ready to put her on an action plan for to prepare to fire her. Right, basically to document this with HR and terminate her. Recommend termination. But this teacher needs a mentor for attention and support, or I guess euphemisms for we need to watch this like a hawk. We need to know what's going on in this teacher's classroom. Critique the teacher may be showing signs of corrupted morals in the consequences given. The student by cheating, and even the administration for considering the reactions of sponsors and considering sharing information or discussing. So violations of FERPA, like we mentioned earlier. And then finally, we have the capricious did the crime match the punishment here. So that falls under critique. And then finally, the profession, we felt that this was probably the worst of all of them. Accountability for student academic and social success, ethical behavior, equity, social justice, all of these things were violated. The best interest of the student, moral, legal consequences, just basically a laundry list of things that we felt were not met by the teacher, and by extension, the principal for not maybe having caught this. It depends on what time of year this was. Sounds like it was late in the year, but definitely something we need to look at. Sound about right?
Yep.
All right. And then finally, we have at the last slide, we're going to recommend that, I don't know how to make that move. Savannah, can that move forward? Sorry. Bobby's actions need to be addressed because he did cheat. So we're going to effectively come up with a plan for him, either disciplinary, we do a 0, something's going to have to happen there, but we got to decide on that. The teacher needs to be put on an action plan and or assigned a mentor for support. And then finally, if the teacher fails to meet the goals of the action plan and or refuses to work with a mentor, administration should recommend the teacher to HR for termination of contract, and HR could offer the teacher to resign or just not renew the contract at the end of that period.
All right. So excellent presentation. To your number 2 here, you can go ahead and stop your share now. As to your number two, I have shared with you my professional growth plan. I call it MTSS for teachers. I've shared that with you. From my experience, this is, again, it may not be your experience, but from my experience, if I wanted to try to terminate a teacher, my experience was that I had a much better case if I did both, did the action plan and mentor. I had a much better case when I presented it to the superintendent, who was going to have to sell it to the school board, that we're going to let this teacher go. So my recommendation, and again, this is not law, this is Dale's recommendation, that if you got a teacher that's in a case like this, you're much stronger if you do both the action plan and the mentor. And as you know from my MTSS, I do that. Teachers that are struggling for whatever reason, even if they're veteran teachers, I always recommend an action plan and a mentor. If you do one or the other, your chances of success, if they're not successful, your chances of success are not nearly as good as if you've done both. Because one of the things that the superintendent's going to say, did you do everything you could? I mean, that's what Dr. Booker's going to ask you. Did you do everything you could? Well, no, I could have done this. Well, why didn't you do that? And again, it's kind of like when you go to court, you're the one on trial. Even though the teacher is the one, they don't put it's crazy. When you go to court in these cases, they put the school administration on trial rather than what the kid did or didn't do, or the teacher did or didn't do. You have to be above reproach. Did you do everything that you could do? Did you do both? And you know, every time I ever walked out of court with a school court on a school case, I felt like I was the one that our school was, our district, whatever level I was when I had to go, was the one on trial and not the person that we were there about. That's just the way it works, especially in juvenile court. That's why I said you'll get your feelings hurt real quickly in juvenile court. It's amazing to me from the bench how judges talk to school administrators. I think it's an absolute travesty, but it's just the way it works. It is, you know, if you ever get a chance to go, you should go and see it. And then you will understand why I get as exercised as I get. I'm trying to keep you from, you know, I can't keep you from going, but boy, if you lose, and it does not go well for you if you lose. All right, so we got 2 action plans so far. Group number 3, come on down. Good job, group 2, by the way, and group 1.
I don't know who group 3 is, but I guess we can go ahead.
Go, Daphne, go. Y'all supposed to be leaders. Jump right in there.
All righty. I'm sorry, my computer's going very slow. All right.
All right.
Dr. Lamb, just let me know when you're done.
I'm ready.
Okay. So,
I got my book.
all right. We understand that everybody knows the background, and so we didn't take a lot of time to go over that. We got straight to what the principal's course of action could be, beginning with determining if the demands of the baseball team are unreasonable, consider options in regards to consequences for Bobby, or look at the options through different lenses, considering the 4 paradigms: justice, critique, care, and profession. Then we move to a deeper level of what could be the principal's course of action, enforcing the school's policy on cheating. And then finally, and ultimately, being transparent about the decision-making process. So those were just some of the actions that the principal could take. Then we considered, as I said earlier, the 4 ethical paradigms: ethic of justice, being fairness and equitability, Was the teacher's actions arbitrary or capricious? We determined that, yeah, I mean, not the teacher's actions, the rule itself arbitrary. Was it equitable? Yes. Was it the teacher's punishment capricious? Yes, it was excessive. Then we considered the ethic of critique in terms of power dynamics. What kind of power did the teacher exercise over the student, Bobby? And as well, the ethic of care, loyalty, trust, connection. What kind of connections did the teacher have with Bobby? And that's kind of obvious. And as well, what kind of connection did she have with her administrator? Again, kind of obvious, given that she showed up with a representative from her HR, from the union. And can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. All right, and then the ethic of profession. Where was the accountability on behalf of the teacher? Was there transparency in her actions? And I think at the end there was transparency because obviously she tried to fail him. But did she try to go through her principal first and this kind of thing and have that discussion? And the answer is no. And then as always, first and foremost with the ethical profession, what is best for kids? And that should always be our first priority of consideration. Our next slide goes over the ethic of justice.
Daphne, I don't see our slide moving forward, but maybe I'm crazy.
No, it's kind of gone dark.
Okay, I don't know why I did that.
There we go.
Okay, so with the ethic of justice, some questions, that came to mind for us, and when you're looking at it through this lens, are what are the rules, codes, or policies that relate to this problem, which I know we've talked about already, and is the policy itself fair? We also agreed that the policy is not cut and dry in the way that's worded, at least in their student handbook, the way it was written in the case study. Because of the word may, there was some wiggle room in there, but it is fair in the fact that the wording of the policy itself does not reinforce inequalities, and is not an issue of the substantive due process. It's an issue of procedural due process because the punishment does not fit the crime, basically, in this case. We felt that it was an overreach by the teacher, and the teacher could have offered a second assignment with a reduced grade. The parents should have been contacted and looped into the situation and involved in the discussion about what occurred in the classroom, or like the plagiarism aspect of it, because if you're considering it a discipline problem, then the parents should be contacted and looped in. The teacher could have and should have consulted with the principal before giving the grade of 0 to seek alternative solutions, because one assignment should not have caused a student to fail an entire class. Next slide, Daphne. All right, ethic of critique. Sorry, I see it now. Would giving Bobby leniency reinforce the imbalance of power and the idea that it's all about who you know, or that sports matter more than academics? To us, we were thinking that Bobby's uncle is an outspoken member of the school board, as it says in there, like that's what they said, and president of the Chamber of Commerce that sponsors the baseball team. So to us, it was a real concern, mainly because regardless of the intent, that perception is reality, and that it would be a bad look in general for the school. Like, it would have to be very clear that if that policy was out there in that district, written that way, I know regardless of what the law says, if that they're saying that in the handbook, that's the way the policy was written, then they would have to do a lot to be sure that they would follow the same course of action the next time if this happened with another student, because that, like in our second bullet, would they skirt that policy the next time and give another student the same consequence as Bobby if he chose not to follow the policy as it was written in the student handbook, the way it was laid out in the case study?
So our next slide is about the ethic of care. Can you see that?
Yes.
Charlene, can you see it? I can only see our presentation, so I can't see Charlene and if she's having technical trouble or not. Can somebody tell me?
I can see your slide. I mean, I can see that it's the ethic of care, but I don't, Shailene?
I don't see Charlene now. Nope, she's not on.
Okay, so ethic of care, is it worth risking the trust that the principal has between himself and the teachers in the school if he does not follow the school policy? And Charlene is sending a text saying she got kicked out. So I'm not sure, but nevertheless, following policy and backing the teacher reinforces relationship between principal and staff and empowers teachers. But our concern with that was, you know, are you backing what you know is the right thing to back? So, and it sounds like I heard a ding. Is that Charlene coming back?
Yes, that's me. I was kicked out of the meeting. I apologize
No
to
worries.
everybody.
So Charlene, you can go ahead and talk about the ethic of care.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. All right, so is it worth risking the trust he has between himself and the teachers in the school if he does not follow the school policy? Now, as Dr. Lam alluded to, this has no bearing on what is happening in this case because she did not follow the rules. So we should not even consider in terms of relationships. Following policies and backing the teacher reinforces the relationship between principal and staff and empowers teachers. Again, this has no bearing on what was supposed to be done. And will his decision cause harm to anyone? Now, in any decision-making process, nobody goes unscathed. At some point, you're going to make a decision, but it has to be for the greater good of all. And in this case, we want to consider what is best or in the best interest of Bobby in terms of him being able to pursue his career and academic goals. This particular decision would have prevented him from going forward.
Whoops, sorry.
You're fine. Also want to add that the ethics of care, it reinforces the importance of students and their development and focusing on their goals and career. I don't think the teacher in this case was considering Bobby's opportunities in terms of pursuing baseball outside of school. And it also gives credence to people more than principals. So you want to consider, in this case, trust, communication, having relationship with your students. So if it is that she had a relationship with Bobby, she probably would have checked on him to see that he's progressing in terms of completing the assignment rather than waiting at the end to find out that he actually cheated because of pressure from baseball. So she did not exercise the virtues of compassion, trust, and understanding, and there was no reciprocity given to Bobby. In this case, it was merely probably vindictive on her part when she made that decision. I think I'm finished there. Ethics of profession, you want to acknowledge personal and moral, your personal morals and your ethics following the code of conduct, professional code of conduct where this is concerned. So the principal would have to reference that understanding of underlying expectations from the community and the school board, what is expected from leaders in terms of making equitable decisions, and accountability to professional ethic, transparency. So the principal did reach out to the superintendent in terms of getting his feedback. So I think that he wanted to air the situation to find out, what is it that I should do going forward? Having conversation with the teacher as well, that shows some transparency, because he could have just made the decision, because principals have that authority to grade students. So he could have probably just override her decision and gone ahead and given his consequence. And I think I've covered everything there. So we'll move on to our takeaways.
So our takeaways were just 3 very cut and dry takeaways. Always prioritize what is in the best interest of students. Provide due process to all parties involved, and everyone should understand the roles and responsibilities of each staff member according to the handbook.
Very good. Very good. All right, you can stop your share now. I'm trying to keep an eye on our time here. I've got 3 things that I'm going to reference when we get done, but I'm going to touch on one of them right now. Nowhere in 115C288 does it say that it's the principal's job to support teachers when they're wrong. It doesn't say that the principal supports teachers anywhere in 115C288. You've got to change your lens and start dispelling the notion that the administrator's job to make teachers' lives fun and easy and better. You can't be a champion for teachers. You must be a champion for students. Now, if we can facilitate teachers and do the right thing for them, again, I'm married to one. Well, she's retired now, but she was a teacher for curriculum instructional specialist. But I have nothing against teachers, but you've got to know what your job is. My job this semester is to change your lens from one side of the desk to the other. I told you the story of Dr. Maraglia that works with us as principal over in Charlotte. Did I tell you the story of the first time that she applied to be a principal fellow at UNC Charlotte? What happened? She got turned down, and she was, everybody in the district, she was like the whiz kid. Everybody thought that, that they would fight to get her. She didn't make it the first time around. On the debrief, they asked her, what in the world had you said that kept them from picking you? I mean, it was pretty much a sure thing. And she told them what she'd said, and they said, well, no wonder they didn't pick you. Why in the world did you go in and tell them that your goal in life was to be a champion for teachers, and that you were there to, the reason you wanted to be a principal was to, to be a champion for teachers? They're not going to pick you, because that's not the job. Your job is to be champion for students. And this notion that if we discipline this teacher, that all the rest of them, that's not supporting teachers. No, that's not what that is. Good teachers will understand that you can't do something like this to a kid over something as insignificant as turning in his brother's homework assignment. I mean, go out in public and try to defend this out in public. I can imagine this crazy uncle out, at the local ball field. Bobby turned in his brother's assignment and you failed him for the whole year. That's just as crazy as it sounds. Your job is to be a champion for students. If you can facilitate teachers, we want you to do that. But it can't, if it's a choice between them and the teacher, it has to be for the kids. It just has to be. So I'll save my last 2 rants for after our 4th presentation. All right, our last group of the evening. Are you ready? Who is sharing?
sorry. Can y'all see it now?
Yes, we can.
I'm
And we're so
sorry.
excited.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll do the first two slides, the role of the principal in relation to the scenario. The principal grades and classifies students. Also, administrators must be ethical in their actions. Upholding this decision would be unethical to support the teacher in, the way that she wanted to discipline Bobby for plagiarism. Principals must execute decisions or consequences equitably. And in this scenario, the principal should not consider Bobby's athlete star status nor connections. The teacher needs to be advised by the principal that the punishment is capricious, is extremely excessive. And one of the 4 paradigms of the school executive is justice, and allowing others to sway him to negate this paradigm would be unethical. Then the next part, the principal should consider to collaborate with the teacher to follow in order for her to know to follow the law on grading and the outcomes, surrounding the grade that she gave. Discuss how this consequence is extreme for the action with the teacher. Ensure that the penalty is not capricious or arbitrary. It was both. Explain that the consequences for cheating will follow district guidelines, and then the discipline will fit the infraction. And then the disciplinary action for the teacher, an action plan, and then if she does something of this nature again, possible suspension. So that's my part.
I'm going to be talking about the due process and the arbitration and capriciousness of the case study. The due process, we know that Bobby was not given due process. He had the proper notice of the charges, but he did not have an equitable and impartial hearing for this case. We know that substantive due process, the district grading policy is equitable, but the teacher was not following the policy, which was resulting in breaking the law. The procedural due process, that's really where we get into the trouble of, it was not following due process. The school policy states, the cheating may require a failing grade, but ultimately the grading policy from the district has to be followed, which the teacher did not do. The teacher also could have chosen to give Bobby, she used to give Bobby a failing grade by choice. Like this was just seems like the first offense. She just automatically failed him. She could have given him other options to complete the assignment, and the policy was not directly clear. It was given some wiggle room, but we know it's because they would have been breaking federal law if it did not. The assignment being counted more than half the grade is not equitable. It's arbitrary, and it does not follow grading policy, which is breaking the law again. And ultimately, the principal has the right to the authority to change the grade and, make it justified. We know that it was arbitrary in Bobby's case that the assignment counted for more than half of his grade, in which resulted in him failing the whole year. And then that leads to being capricious. I mean, to have him failing the class resulting in summer school and failing the whole year, it's just outrageous because he was not given, the assignment was not properly given a proportional weight or percentage of his grade, and she abused her authority to assign the failing grade.
Okay, and then we discussed the 4 paradigms. So the first one that we talked about was the justice. And there we've just got the definitions behind the ethics of justice. And then we go on to discuss, if you want to go ahead and go to the next one. The fairness, the equity and justice. The procedural justice is the treatment. Oh. Okay, of individuals in applying law to an impartial, unbiased, and fair manner.
through due process. Although procedural justice examines the fairness of the application of law, substantive justice focuses on the fairness of laws themselves. So all students must be held accountable according to the policy. And is it fair for a student to fail an entire course because of one assignment? It was not fair in accordance to the school grading policy. When looking at the standard, the reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, the teacher had reasonable suspicion to think that Bobby cheated on the assignment due to the fact that she taught the older brother, and she recalled the report from memory. And once she looked into her suspicion and confronted Bobby, he was honest and confessed, stating that baseball was taking up his time, not allowing him to complete his work. And it was arbitrary and capricious. In order to make the decision, we need to follow policy without over accentuating the situation, making sure that we are not doing for one student and not for others who might be in the similar situation, while holding teachers accountable for following the policy.
All right, let me stop you there just a second. I want to amplify your the second one here, reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Teachers have more latitude under the law than police do. The standard for teachers is reasonable suspicion and school people. And you're exactly right. She didn't violate the law by knowing, oh, I saw this before, and looking back. That I've had students say, well, she shouldn't have been able to do that. No, we don't hold teachers to the same standards as police. The police standard is probable cause, which means that the police couldn't have done that. But no, the teacher was well within her rights to go back and look to see if this wasn't, in fact, a previous assignment that she had turned into her. That's exactly right. But some cases of discipline, we have to understand that teachers can do things beyond what police can do. But then on other things, we have to understand that police have more powers than teachers or school administrators do. And so you have to understand the difference. The standard for school folks is reasonable suspicion. I don't have to have seen a gun. If somebody just tells me, I can go look. Police can't do that. Now, their standard is probable cause. So there was no illegality with her going back and looking at previous assignments or grades or whatever. As they point out here, that's okay. What she did, it did not violate, because she does not have to have probable cause like a policeman would. So that's the deal there. But teachers don't have power of subpoena either. And that one will come up when we're talking about cell phones and things like that later on. Very good.
Thank you. Okay. And then we talked about care. The ethic of care is compassion oriented and is concerned with how decisions, issues, and circumstances serve to hurt others, such as an ethics of care is characterized by virtues such as compassion, understanding, and trust. So we talked about loyalty and trust. Without loyalty and trust in the policy, you will cause a divide within the school community and with stakeholders. Each year, most schools have students and parents sign a code of conduct, which would house the school's policies. This would ensure that all parties are aware of the consequences for cheating, ensuring that communication of the policy was provided. Concern and connection, understanding why the student is choosing sports over academics, putting emphasis on the student being honest and owning one's mistake. If he fails the class and has to attend summer school, then he cannot partake in the summer tournament. It means a lot of kids are going, and their families, means a lot to kids and their families, and helps a lot of kids get scholarships. The teacher did not show any concern for him missing out on possible scholarship opportunities. Nurtured and encourage versus achievement. The teacher could encourage him to do additional work to counter the grade, encouraging him to put his academics before sports. This again goes back to the relationship that the teacher has with the student, even though she did not follow the grading policy and is in the wrong for failing him for one assignment.
Sorry about that. I'm up next. Hey, I'm up next with critique, and I can't see from my screen, so I'm gonna read from another screen, okay? The ethic of critique is rooted in critical theory and emphasizes ethical behavior, which addresses inequities among individuals and groups related to social class and other factors that impact one's power and voice. In this instance, there were ethical and possibly, but I think we said that there were no real political implications surrounding the scenario. A lot of times others can cloud a leader's judgment based on perceived power and social status. However, the principal, I think, stood on what he believed was right, went to the superintendent. As far as the incident and offense type versus action, clearly the teacher overstepped with what she felt was right. The action did not, the incident did, okay, so what am I trying to say? So the incident of the cheating did not deserve the type of action of failing the course, which showed signs of corrupted morals and misuse of power by the teacher. The ethic of I'm going to the next one on mine because I can't see that one. The ethic of profession is relatively new. I did a little research, as it took more than a decade of collaborative research, writing, and teaching ethics to develop, according to Shapiro and Skepkoff in 2011. She should have been able to model self-awareness by reflecting on her practice and ethical behavior, which she should not. She should have considered the moral consequences of the decision, and she did not take into account the best interests of the student. She did not show any accountability for the student academic and social success, as she did not, in our opinion, seem to care is probably a strong word about, but care about what happened to the student.
Okay. Excellent job tonight. Overall, I'm very pleased. I want to make a couple of points. Group 3 didn't vote. What was your vote on what to do with the teacher, group 3? Daphne, Charlene, Angie, what are you going to do with her? You got to vote.
I'm going to go with that since I was kicked out. So course of action for the principal, we decided that we were going to assign disciplinary action to Bobby that was not academic related, and also put the teacher on an action plan.
Action plan.
Yes.
All right. All right. So let me quickly reference some of the materials we're going to cover next week. When we do discipline, let me close that and switch servers over to this one, move that out of the way. So when we start looking at discipline next week, and please don't have time to be out here. So here's our Bible, our manual for discipline and due process. And so back to what must be reported, all those things, all the laws that say, right here's what I was talking about. This is when I had the ex parte conversation with Wood a while ago. You see what this says right here? In 2014, the Department of Public Instruction took over responsibility for Office of Civil Rights reporting, previously done by LEAs. That's what I said back in my day, right before I retired. I was the one that had to do that. Actually, but those could be called the Civil Rights Data Collection. All right. And so zero tolerance. That's what this means. That we're now under these federal laws that we weren't before. That's exactly what I was talking about. We have to report seclusions and restraint. We have to report if we violate the law with zero tolerance expulsions. And here is that. Child, his remainder of the year or longer because of zero tolerance policies. These are illegal. That's what I was talking about. The federal definition is right here. And we have to go by that, which is more restrictive on the school. So that's exactly what I was talking about, is they acknowledge, the state's telling you in their manual that they are superseded by these federal laws right here. They're telling you that up front, that you got to follow them. You can't use the least restrictive state law. You have to go with the federal definitions. And if you do these things, you have to report yourself. And that will not go well for you, by the way. That'll make the superintendent mad as fire if you do something like that. All right, so that's what I was referring to. Again, you got to know your law. Data collection, baseball. All right, so let's see. All right. Where's my man Alex?
Right here.
All right, what is this, Alex?
North Carolina High School Athletics Association handbook.
All right, are middle schools covered under this as well?
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. All right, so one of the things in all of you that I've waited to the end to talk about is what was Bobby's excuse for cheating?
Baseball.
Halftime baseball.
Baseball was taking too much time. Alex, is that a reasonable argument on Bobby's part?
No.
Why not? Because of this manual, right? What does this manual say?
Manual says that you're a student first and an athlete second.
That is correct. And it also sets copious guidelines in here for how much you can play, when you can play, how many, even in baseball, how many pitches you can throw. Statute 2.2.14 says how long can you practice every day? Hour and a half. Hour and a half. So is it true? Is it true that Bobby is spending way too much time playing baseball? It may be. But is that something that the school is that you can blame the school for? No. Alex, what's your job as athletic director?
What's my job?
In terms of compliance here, are you, as athletic director, are you not supposed to make sure that you're in compliance with that manual?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to add too, middle school was also controlled by the NCDPI on top of the NCHSAA.
Yeah, you've got two masters. That's exactly right. Some places there's a debate whether middle schools fall under. That's why I asked. I wasn't being facetious. Some places argue that middle schools are not under the High School Athletic Association. Now, the High School Athletic Association says they are, but DPI has stepped in and said you're going to do this anyway. That's exactly right. If you argue that you shouldn't have to come under this as a middle school, okay, we'll pick it up as DPI. You will follow these rules, but you should read that thing. It's 143 pages long, covers every sport, it even has pitch counts. It has how many days you can't practice on work days, scrimmages, everything that you can think of about athletics is in that manual. We hire athletic directors at both the middle, junior high, and senior high level, and it's their job to make sure that everything in that manual is followed to the letter of the law, because even a small violation will cause you to have to forfeit games or your ability to play in the postseason, and nobody wants that. Trust me. And so the notion here, it may be, but now I will share this with you. I had a similar problem with my baseball players when I was a baseball coach 45 years ago. Or 42, 3, 4, 5 years ago. I had a similar problem with my kids playing too much, spending too much time, sore arms and all that. But it wasn't from me. What happened what happened when I got through about dusk in the wintertime? You start in February. They've moved the date back to 2.5 weeks. You start February 1st. But now they even tell you what day you can start. And our county had a rule that we couldn't practice outside if it was below 45 degrees. And then there's heat restrictions even written into the manual now. But one of the problems that I had is I didn't have lights on our baseball field. When I'd get through with practice, we'd run it for exactly an hour and a half. And by the way, you can't start during school. You can't start practice until the school day is over. And in districts like Charlotte, Mecklenburg, you can't start until you cleared the bus lot and had at least 30 minutes of study hall. So we let out at 2:15, and we couldn't start athletics, even practice, until 3 o'clock. All these things are very, very scripted. But my problem with my players is what happened as soon as practice was over? What would their daddies do? Have them go over to the Little League park where they had lights and out there under the lights at night. Now, that could happen. My point is, if something like this came up, what would I very quietly and discreetly do with my athletic director? I would pull my athletic director aside and say, what's happening with baseball? Is it possible that this is going to become an issue that comes back and bites us? But more than likely, Bobby's issue with baseball is travel ball or Little League or Senior League or, the Copperheads or whatever. It's not the school, because the school is highly regulated in terms of how much time kids can be involved. And Alex is right. Middle school kids it says so in the manual, have to be students first and athletes second. But that is something that you'd have to look at. Now, let's conclude here tonight. We have 4 votes for an action plan. My vote would be termination. Might not get it, but I would certainly try. Why would I be that? Of course, now, I'm old and grumpy. That's number one. But number two, why would I do that? Why would I say, this person's got to go?
You're a real champion for kids, Dr. Lamb. That's why.
I detected some a little sarcasm there.
A skosh is what we say is sarcasm.
Just a little bit. But why?
I think
I'm
you
not
might have
anti-teacher.
trouble supporting unethical behavior. You know what I mean? Like, because a mentor supports instructional things that teachers need help with, whereas this is really an ethical situation. So is that teacher really going to change their ways, basically? But I think, like you were saying, having the mentor and the action plan probably will help, because I know of someone that has been on a plan for a long time, like an action plan, and to me, I don't know much about the other end, but to me, it almost seems like even with that, it's very hard to terminate someone. So I feel
It
like
is.
in this situation, with it being ethical, whereas the person I'm thinking of is more of an instructional thing that is willing to work with their mentor, so they are able to have that longer thing. So I just, like, with that, you can't really fix unethical unless you just have a complete change of heart and you trust that.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't going to, the reason why, and thank you, Savannah. Savannah just hit the nail on the head. Leopard doesn't change his spots. How you do some things is how you do all things. If I can't trust you, if you're an unethical person, and we have gone through all 4 paradigms, and we can clearly say without hesitation that this is an unethical person, I can't trust you to do anything. And the reason why I would attempt to let this one go and not do the action plan in the mentor is it's not instructional, and she broke federal and state law. Now, I've got a good chance on this one. Now, if it was just an ethical breach, that'd be bad enough. But she violated federal and state law here. I got a good chance on this. Maybe I won't get her, but I've got a good chance. But I have to establish in school that we can't be breaking the law, not for the purpose of harming kids. Think about that one. How well would that play as a newspaper headline in the Gaston Gazette? How well would that play on WBTV? Teacher breaks law not to help a child, but to harm a child. We can't keep on taking the hits that we're taking in our business, folks, with all the negative news that we get with teachers doing bad things to kids and all. We just can't keep taking these things. People believe this stuff that we're, and then these court cases come out. We have to, at some point, we're going to have to draw the line and clean up our business. I'm sorry, we're just going to have to. it was standard. You know, one of my buddies that grew up right out the road here in the curve here at Lake Lure, his first administrative job was over at Polk Central, which is just right over there. We're right here on the county line in the very northern part. And his first job, they hired him as an AP, and he was so excited. He got over there and he found out why they hired him. He said, "We need to let you. We need for you to fire the football coach once the season's over." "Well, why'd you bring me?" "Well, we don't want to do it because, you know, we need you to." "Well, why have I got to fire the football coach as soon?" "Well, he's winning. Don't fire him until the season's over." "Well, why?" "Well, he's got 2 cheerleaders pregnant and he's married to another woman, but he's got 2 cheerleaders pregnant." I guess one would have been okay in Polk County. But 2, he had 2 pregnant at the same time. So he had to go. And as soon as GA fired the football coach, they of course then fired GA. They just brought him in to do that. That kind of stuff used to go on in schools all the time. There's one here in the county that, you know, I can't tell you the number of people that, you know, lost their marriage over, you know, having relationships with school, with students in school. That just used to be a part of it, especially out in the, we got to stop this kind of stuff. We got to stop harming kids. We've got to quit doing these kinds of things. We're losing market share, folks. Do you know that? I read one of your OMAs this week, and you were talking about how many kids you'd lost since the pandemic. And your parents have choices, private schools, charter schools. We're losing market share. Why are we losing market share? We're taking a beating public relations wise. I can tell you why. Saw one again today. Teacher arrested for inappropriate behavior with a student. We got to clean our act up. And who does it fall to do that? You people on the screen right there, school administrators. That's who's got to clean the act up here. I'm telling you, when you go to court, we have lost any sense of respect or status in court. We just get wore out when we go to court now. They just talk to us awful. But unfortunately, we've earned that with our behavior and allowing teachers to hang around and keep on and not making them, you know. One of the things I say to my EDCI ladies is you can't be a leader until you can fire somebody just because they can't teach. I mean, just, you know, well, he's a good person or she's a good person. No, what do we hire them to do to teach? We've got to quit keeping people that can't teach, that prey on kids or do bad things like this to a kid. I mean, this would leave a mark for a lifetime. Only 12% of kids ever graduate from high school that fail a year. I mean, this is outside of sexual or physical abuse. This is the worst thing you can do to a kid. Broke federal and state law. If you don't try to let this one go, what's it going to take? That is my argument. Now, that's in the context of, I don't know what your superintendent would say. I've known him for a long time. I believe I know what kind of person he is and how he puts kids first. I don't want to say anything good about him since I was on his doctoral committee and he actually, we won't get into that. But I believe him to be a quality person, and I'm not saying this for his consumption, but I believe him to be a quality person, and I believe that he supports the notion that we ought to be champions for kids. I believe that he and your district support the notion that teachers' behavior should be legal and above and ethical and above reproach. I don't know that you could get rid of this teacher, but you know, I'd certainly try. I would certainly try in this case, but you're probably all right. Probably an action plan with a mentor would probably be the safest route to go, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't sleep with myself and live with myself if I didn't try at least. I might have to do the action plan, but I'd certainly try. And I would hope that the teachers, the faculty at the school where I was principal, where this happened, would understand that this teacher went too far. This was a bridge too far. This was too much. This wasn't that I hate teachers or I'm trying to put them in their place. That we just can't allow, that we have to be champions for kids. We just can't allow something this egregious to go unanswered. That we just can't. Case studies are hard. There's a lot in them. The one next time is about the superintendent. And I'll go ahead and tell you. Superintendent, what he wants to do is a wonderful thing, but it's just not legal. You got to dig into the Leandro case. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do our second case study. You got to dig into that Leandro case and understand funding. That you can't be moving money around just because you want to. That he's violating federal and state law. His plan would do that. You got to figure out why. Questions you have for me? Finish up those OMA ones, and the rest of you that are moving into 2, you should be good.
Yeah.
It's been a blast. Anything before we go?
Have you got like 2 seconds?
I do. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week. Let me stop my recording. You don't have to capture that. Everybody have a good week. Thank you for coming tonight.